Sorry, I've just got this box on my... So last time I was here, I spoke about the hindrance of restlessness and worry. I'm not sure if any of you heard that, but so I thought I'd delve a little more deeply into the hindrances, and so I'll talk a bit more broadly about them tonight as a group, and working with them, with the hindrances generally. So I've called this talk The Hindrances, Recognition and Discernment. And when I started writing notes for this, the first thing I wrote was, when do we call experience a hindrance? Classically, in the Buddha's teachings, he calls a hindrance any experience that creates an obstacle that overwhelms our awareness and weakens our discernment. And the Buddha outlined 5 specific categories, if you like, of hindrances: sensual desire, ill will and aversion, dullness and drowsiness, sometimes that's called sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and paralysing doubt. So essentially these are states of mind that in which we become lost or entangled. Yeah, they cloud our discernment and envelop us in a form of some form of delusion. And there's always there's always some sense of self, or me or mine or I, present and active. You know, in the thinking that the I or the me or the mine is in the driver's seat when a hindrance is present. So when we're in the grip of a hindrance, whether it's, you know, a sense desire, some form of aversion, it might be anger or hatred or fear perhaps, we lose the ability to think clearly. I think anger's a good example here. You know, when we're in the grip of an explosion of anger, it's very difficult to think clearly. And in that, discerning what is good for us and good for other people is really compromised. So we lose clear functioning of the mind, essentially. And because of this lack of clarity, there's no possibility for serenity or insight to arise. So this is why it's important that we work with the hindrances. And the Buddha's famous simile that he used for the hindrances is a bowl of still, clear water that we would use to see our reflection in. And he says when the hindrances are present, when any one of the hindrances are present, the water is variously clouded or contaminated in some way. So when desire is present, or sensual desire, it's coloured by dye. He said it's coloured by dye. So our vision is coloured in some way. When aversion or ill will is present, it's said to be like boiling water. So, you know, it's really heated. It's like, you know, the explosion of anger that I mentioned. When dullness is present, it's like the bowl of water is full of algae. So it's, you know, choked up with these weeds. When restlessness and worry is present, the Buddha says it's like the water's been whipped up by the wind. So the surface of the water is very agitated. It's exactly how, you know, restless and worry can feel in the body, yeah? And doubt causes muddiness, or sometimes it's said that it's like a bowl of water sitting in a dark place, so we can't actually see what's going on. I think they're really helpful similes to get a sense of how these hindrances really work and really present themselves to us in the body and in the mind. And so on the other hand, when the hindrances are absent, there's mental clarity like a bowl of still, clear water. There's such a different image, isn't it? And in this bowl of still clear water, we can see our reflections really vividly. So there's a clarity here that is present that doesn't exist when we're caught up in a storm of anger, or we're reaching out to a thing or a person in some sort of a reaching through desire. So when there's mental clarity here, it supports insight to arise. It supports the mind to become concentrated, and as a result, our actions become more skillful. So with this mental clarity, we actually look after ourselves more skillfully, and we look after others. And in this respect, working with the hindrances really creates this strong link between the practice of ethics and the practice of concentration. It's two of the three wings, two of the three areas of training that the Buddha laid out. And in the Satipatthana Sutta, this practice that we have been doing here tonight, working with the foundations of mindfulness in the body, in the mind, working with the hindrances is the first practice that the Buddha presents in the fourth foundation of mindfulness, that of the mindfulness of dharmas. And this foundation kind of takes the theory and the doctrine of the Buddha's teachings and really brings it front and centre in our practice. It really brings it into the central, it becomes the focus of our practice in this fourth Satipatthana. We might say it's where the Dharma really comes alive in our practice as we start to investigate the underlying functions of our human experience. So in the first three foundations of mindfulness, we get to know the territory of the human experience through the body, the feelings, and the mind states. And we get to know these three territories, if you like, by using the body and the feelings and the mind states as objects of meditation. We follow the direct arising and passing away of the breathing and the body sensations, and of pleasant and unpleasant, and feeling when emotions arise and various mind states arise. We watch this, we start tracking all of these functions, all of these things happening in the body and mind. And then in the fourth foundation that I'm speaking about tonight, we continue this study of mind states, but the focus changes specifically to their relationship, the mind states' relationships to conditionality. So this is when we start studying everything that happens has causes and conditions and proceeds according to causes and conditions and leads to results in line with these causes and conditions. So this is the cause and effect that the Buddha teaches about. And the mind states that we look at here become a lens through which we really contemplate this conditionality, this cause and effect. And because these foundations of mindfulness, this form of meditation that we do, is ultimately about awakening, about waking up from our suffering. The aim here is to understand and abandon these mental conditions, the hindrances that lead away from awakening, and cultivate the mental conditions that lead us towards them, towards awakening, This is the 7 awakening factors. So we have to work with the hindrances, And as they drop away, we can then open more fully to the 7 awakening factors. And they're both seen as really crucial in this path towards realization, towards awakening. We can't do one without the other. So why do we start with the 5 hindrances? So essentially we need to know what gets in our way, what blocks us from progressing on the path before we can fully experience deep ease and insight. So working with the hindrances is like spring cleaning the mind, we might say, in a way that helps then cultivate the more refined factors that leads towards awakening. So we might say it's like building a new railway to a destination town. We first need to clear the passage for that railway line to be built before it can be built and carry people and cargo to its destination in a smooth way without interruption. Yeah, so we can't get to this place with if there's maybe forests. We won't go there. But we need to clear the obstacles for that railway line to be built before we can get the train on the railway line. So this is in the same way we work with the hindrances at this point because they're an obstacle, because they're an impediment to further progress towards awakening, towards our release from suffering. And sensual desire, and this is the desire that enslaves us, it traps us, it keeps us ensnared in its grip. It's the addictions that we have. It's not desire per se. Our desire for a peaceful and just world, for happiness for ourselves and for others, is a skillful desire. Yeah. So I'm not talking about that kind of desire. This is the desires that keep us entangled in our habitual ways of falling off the path, and that our addictions that keep us enslaved to suffering. Yeah. So all these 5 hindrances that I've mentioned, they're such powerful forces, and they can knock us really off track. Yeah, I mean we all know this. The Buddha likens them to a debt. He likens desire to a debt. Ill will and aversion he likens to a disease. Dullness and drowsiness he likens to being in prison. Restlessness and worry he likens to slavery, and doubt, this paralyzing doubt that can take hold of us sometimes, like being lost in a desert. I mean, they're really powerful images. And I think he used these powerful images because he could see how powerfully the hindrances can take hold of us and knock us off track. And they ensnare us in these unskillful and painful states of being. So this is a practice that we engage in with working with the hindrances, and it's a process of patience and commitment to letting go, abandoning them. So it doesn't just happen once and we say, I know the hindrances now, I'm finished with them. We need to see again and again, with deepening awareness and deepening conviction actually, how we get stuck, how we get mired in the mud of habitual desire, aversion, dullness, doubt, whatever it is. So in practice, we can work with the hindrances in 2 stages. And firstly, as the Buddha taught with all of our practice, is recognition. We recognise when a hindrance is present or absent. And the sutta actually says, if sensual desire is present within, one knows sensual desire is present within me. Or if sensual desire is not present within, one knows sensual desire is not present within me. And this continues for all the other 4 hindrances. So this is a pretty simple statement, of an honest appraisal of actually what's happening without glossing over or avoidance. This is what's here, simply, sitting with what's here. So an example, I was aware of aversion arising recently as I drove home after 2 weeks of camping on the coast. Amanda knows this drive. Down at Cape Conran on the southeast coast. And I was making my way with my partner through the outer edges of Melbourne. And after, this was a big schism, you might say, visually, to go from living under Banksias with lace monitors, lots of wildlife, with the surge of the ocean there 24 hours a day, to then driving through the suburban sprawl of outer Melbourne on the southeast side. And I could feel aversion arising. The body started contracting in response to this story that the mind was telling me about the ugliness I was driving through, This sense of self was suddenly started building an investment in this belief that where I'd been on the coast was far superior. It was much better than where I was now, that it had more worth and more value. And the peace and the relaxation that I'd developed over 2 weeks seemed to just frisher away. And then I could feel myself grasping for it. Oh my God, it's going already. And that then brought more aversion in the form of resentment. This is not fair. Why it's gone already. But, and this is the actual important part for our Dharma practice, I had enough awareness in that moment to actually see what was happening. I could see the aversion, feeling the sensations in the body, noticing the thought process and the I-making that was happening, creating this sort of story of me versus this out there. And it was creating suffering for me. But with that awareness, and then, actually recognizing it, stopping and recognizing what was happening, the aversion abated. Not completely, but it didn't have the hold on me then that it did a couple of minutes before. And this is really key, I think. In our mindfulness practice, it's not about stopping these thoughts and sensations from happening. It's not about pushing away or getting rid of the aversion or the sensual desire or the doubt, whichever hindrance it might be. It's not about driving through that landscape and pretending we're not affected by it, that we're beyond feeling anything towards it, that I'm too spiritual for that. It's actually about recognizing what is happening, what is already here, but we're recognizing it from a Dharma perspective. So we can see the conditions that are leading to this aversion arising. So the recognition of a hindrance being present is sometimes enough for it to dissolve right away. And this can happen when the hindrance is quite weak. So it might be just something that, a bit of an annoyance or something that comes up. We might say it's just only faintly clouding consciousness. And it can also happen when our practice is strong and we've been working with this, over and over for over a period of time. And we're more in tune with seeing when these hindrances arise, yeah, because we're more familiar with them. And as the sutta says, it's important to notice when the hindrances are absent as well. So, you might just, once you start working with the hindrances in this way, it's really powerful to just, you might be sitting having a cup of tea or waiting for a friend, sitting in the sun, and it might be just the thought, aversion is absent. That's simple. And just actually feel what's happening in the body, in the mind, in the heart, when aversion isn't present. I mean, it's actually a really joyful thing to experience. But we don't take notice of when these things aren't here. We only notice them when they're sort of, on top of us, and we're battling with them. So to actually start noticing when they're not present is also a really powerful practice. When your mind's really clear and sharp, and you have a heart full of faith about something, and your confidence is strong, to notice that doubt isn't present can be really powerful. And also, I think I've found really helpful the moment that a hindrance is present and starts dissolving. So when you've actually recognized it and it starts dissipating, just to notice what that feels like, and actually what's happening in the body and the mind as it's dissolving. So what is it in that moment that's changing? What is it that changes? And at other times, when a hindrance arises with greater force, it's really helpful and actually necessary to proceed to the next stage, to the second stage. So we recognise it, and then we proceed to the second stage by exploring the conditions that are underlying the presence of the hindrance. So this is then moving into the next part of the statement that the Buddha makes in the sutta, when he says, "One knows how unarisen sensual desire arises. One knows how arisen sensual desire is removed, and one knows how removed sensual desire does not arise in the future." So this is working through these steps. We're invited here to dig down and unpack and really understand what led to its appearance, what will lead to its passing away, and what will lead to it not arising in the future. Is this all making sense? Yeah? So why is studying these steps, this conditionality in this way, why is it important to our practice? Well, as the Buddha said, and it's such a powerful statement, whoever sees dependent arising or conditionality of our suffering sees the Dharma, and whoever sees the Dharma sees dependent arising. So this is sort of, it's a bit of a key to our, our abandoning suffering. When we understand the conditionality of an experience, how a hindrance or anything else for that matter, how anything comes into being, we enter more fully into what it is to be human. And it actually informs our understanding of the Four Noble Truths and our understanding of the law of impermanence, the nature of impermanence, the suffering that we feel, and then as well the empty, selfless nature of all that exists. But how do we work with this? What are the tools that we can use here? So we might simply explore what happened just before the hindrance appeared. What actions or emotions or events happened that led to the hindrance arising? So a good question here is, how did I get here? So in my example, I stopped once I felt the contraction and this thought of this ugliness that I was driving through, spinning through my mind, and looked at what happened. Like, what happened? Why did I get to this place, with this aversion coursing through my body and mind? Or we might ask, what changed just before the hindrance arose, and how did I respond to that change? So here we're tapping into studying impermanence, essentially. An awareness of impermanence is a really good reference point when we're working with the conditionality of the hindrances. So, for example, you might be sitting in a relaxed way at your laptop, pottering away, I don't know, scrolling through some social media, and an email pops into your inbox. You open it, you read it, then you close your laptop as you realise there's a wave of anger coursing through you. You might feel heat in the head, your heart starts beating faster, you recognise these physical sensations, the hands trembling. So a minute earlier, you didn't even know the email existed, yeah? And now you're feeling like Mount Etna. So what changed? How did this anger, this aversion come to be? Somebody else might walk past behind you, look over your shoulder, read the same email and shrug their shoulders and, wander off, wondering what the problem is. So it's about our own direct experience, not anybody else's. It's about what happens to us in this situation. Where did this anger come from? So what movement happened in the mind is also a good question. Because the body just doesn't feel anger on its own. Yeah, the body is sitting there, the eyes are reading. The eyes aren't feeling anger. It's the mind that leaps in some way and experiences some change happens in the mind that brings the anger into being. What's that movement of the mind that happens? This is what we start to follow. And now that you recognise it and feel it, what will lead to its passing? What can you do now that is skillful, that isn't acting out of that anger, that isn't pushing the anger away? Now, I think it can become a really playful exploration once we get used to working with the hindrances. They almost become like a playmate. You might say, it's like, anger, and you can play with them. Say, where did you come from? Actually have a conversation with this hindrance. Might be a useful way to look at it. Actually, Analio, in writing about the hindrances, says a good attitude is to work with them as you would sit at a chessboard and actually and look at how you got into the mess of where your queen's about to be taken. So, keep this light-hearted, playful attitude. So exploring this stream of conditions closely can really bring such deep freedom. It can be such a powerful teacher and I think a playmate. Why not? And this is really the stuff of our Dharma practice. So it's really important to look here at the stories we're telling ourselves, the views and beliefs and the perceptions that we're holding on to, and really importantly, the identifications that we're gripping onto, that all help feed the hindrance. So there has to be some sort of fuel here that we keep feeding the hindrance, or we starve it. So that's another good image too. Are we actually continually feeding the hindrance, or are we starving it and actually trying to understand it? And sometimes these views and perceptions and stories are so ingrained and subtle, we don't even notice them, we overlook them. And this is why we need to do this exploratory work over and over again, to keep familiarising ourselves more and more with the landscape of conditionality, we might say, to see what relationships are occurring and when. And as we practice like this, we start taking the hindrances less personally. And again, I'd say that this playful attitude really helps with this. We let the identifications dissolve before they take hold. And because they have less hold over us over time, we find they actually don't arise as often or as powerfully, because we nip them in the bud, yeah? Without this clinging and without pushing away, life moves through us and unhindered, more vibrant, without this me, my, I all the time involved. And the Buddha states at the end of the Satipatthana Sutta refrain, which is repeated over and over again throughout the sutta: she abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. And this is such a beautiful statement about this freedom that we experience when we're not pushing away, we're not clinging on to, we're simply letting life flow through us. We're out of time, so I'm just going to read a poem by Rumi to end, which kind of sums up this beautiful freedom when we're not clinging on to life. Be empty of worrying. Think of who created thought. Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open? Move outside the tangle of fear thinking. Live in silence. Flow down and down into always widening rings of being. Okay, thank you. Let's just sit together for a couple of minutes.